So for over 200 years, Pennsylvania and Delaware both claimed the same small piece of land known as the Wedge. So who ended up getting control of this little tiny piece of land? Stay tuned. Alright, so we are on a trail in Chester County, Pennsylvania, just north of Delaware and just kind of east of Maryland. And we are going to eventually get to two marking stones. One is the tri-state marker for Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland. The other one is a stone called the Ark Corner Monument. And both of them, the land within these two stone monuments is what was in dispute for about 200 years. And we're going to find out exactly why, and in the end, which state ended up getting control of this little piece of land. Alright, so this disputed piece of land, it's a wedge-shaped piece of land. We're going to start at what I call the Maryland northeast cornerstone. So this is the point where, if you ever look on a map, you'll notice Maryland comes to this point, and you got Pennsylvania to the north, you got Maryland to the west, and you have Delaware to the east. So this disputed piece of land, known as the Delaware Wedge, starts there, then it goes straight south to along that straight line of Maryland and Delaware. Then it comes to a point. Then on the eastern side, it's not a straight line, it's kind of an arc. The arc is exactly 12 miles from Newcastle, Delaware. And then it goes, then you would follow it north to another monument a second monument we're gonna see, called the Ark Corner Monument. Then the remaining part of the wedge follows what is today that sort of southern Pennsylvania, northern Delaware line from this Ark Corner Monument, about 3/4 of a mile back to what we're about to see, this northeast Maryland Cornerstone. And it was this piece of land that was disputed by both Pennsylvania and Delaware. And in fact, you'll notice on this, on the monument when we get to it, it marks, it's a small monument. Two sides have M's on for Maryland, two sides have P's on for Pennsylvania, but there's nothing marking Delaware. It was put in 1849, but today it marks this tri-state point between Delaware, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. The reason it doesn't have Delaware on it is because of this dispute as to what state this land should belong to. And also, stick around to the end of the video too, because I'm also going to show you another small little monument that's kind of a bonus thing that sort of illustrates the boundary line between Pennsylvania and Maryland. This is the cornerstone up here. And you'll see the no trespassing signs. So that's all private property, but again, you can walk around so you can see P for Pennsylvania in 1849. And then you have the M for Maryland. And then here you have the M for Maryland. So where the stick is, that would be Maryland, Pennsylvania right now. Then Maryland would take a sharp turn here and go this way. This would all be Maryland up to that point. Today, this would all be Delaware up to that point. Line would go across here. That would be that's essentially the border right here. And up until this was settled in 1921, This area was all claimed by both Delaware and Pennsylvania. And again, on the maps, it's shown as being all in Pennsylvania. Today, no one would dispute that this is all Delaware. So, why was this territory in dispute? That's really the question. Alright, so we are going to start with 1681, 1682 time frame, when the land that we call Delaware was granted to William Penn. They kind of had an idea where the border was going to be, but it wasn't seen as real important. It was just kind of like an afterthought. In 1701, though, they decided they better, actually have where a border exists. So that was so 1701 is when they created what was called the 12-mile arc. And they had already known that they were going to do this, but that's when they became official. My understanding is right at the front door of the county courthouse in Newcastle, Delaware. And they went up 12 miles north to the along the river, which would be the boundary with New Jersey. And then they essentially just walked the arc 12 miles around this huge arc. That's why northern Delaware has this big arc as its northern border. That border fell when they reached the arc where the Arc Monument sits today. That region fell about 3/4 of a mile short of the border with Maryland. So that became the question, is who got that little piece of land outside of that arc? It was 3/4 at its northern point. It was about 3/4 of a mile. So it was that portion that was carved out is where the dispute came in, because Pennsylvania argued it's outside of the 12-mile arc, therefore it cannot be considered Delaware. Delaware countered that argument with, well, Pennsylvania's boundary was never supposed to go south with Maryland, so therefore it cannot be part of Pennsylvania. So for the most part, nobody really worried too much about this from 1701 when the survey was done all the way up through 1849 when that survey was done. It was just sort of, Pennsylvania and Delaware both, said it was theirs. All the map makers said it belonged to Pennsylvania. That's why all the maps listed as being part of Pennsylvania. And even afterwards, map makers still listed it as Pennsylvania. Delaware, all at the same time, though, just kind of quietly administered the place. The residents all paid taxes in Delaware. They voted in Delaware. So for all practical purposes, they were living in Delaware, but it's just that anybody from outside Delaware said this was Pennsylvania. Finally, what happened was when the survey was done in 1849, that put the Northeast Cornerstone in place. The reason why Delaware is not listed on it, because they really didn't take any part of it. They basically said, we don't care what you say, this is our land and you can't have it. Whereas Pennsylvania essentially said, no, this is our land and that's that. In 1892, and we're going to see the marker here that was put in 1892, the land was resurveyed again. And actually at that point, it was a commission by both Delaware and Pennsylvania. It was sort of a joint commission that did this. And they both pretty much agreed at the time that the wedge would now go to Delaware. Pennsylvania actually ratified it in 1897 to say, yes, this is now part of Delaware. However, Delaware still just didn't do anything about it. They didn't do anything about it until 1921, when that state finally ratified it. At the same time, Congress had to get involved because of the fact that it involved state boundary lines. Congress also had to pass a resolution saying that this was essentially where the border was. So that was done in 1921, and that's why it was officially resolved in 1921, because that's when all three entities that needed to vote on it finally voted on it and said, this is the border. The border is this straight line going across. Alright, so I think it's also important to note why the 1892 survey was done. It wasn't so much done to resolve this issue, even though it did resolve this issue, well, kind of. The reason why the 1892 survey was done was because the circular boundary was no longer exactly where it needed to be. Landowners that owned property right along the border would often move border markers because maybe most of their land, they lived in Pennsylvania, but some of their land went into Delaware. Well, they didn't want their land in Delaware, so they would just find these border markers and move them. So nobody was exactly certain where exactly the border was. So that was a big part of the reason why this new survey in 1892 was done, so that they could figure out exactly where this border was. Alright, so this is the Arc Cornerstone right up here. And we are just off of a road called Hopkins Road. That part of it there is in Pennsylvania, but the state boundary is just up there, and then you cross back into Delaware just right up the way there. So this marks where Delaware's Arc meets Pennsylvania's southern boundary. But the Arc would have come along here, and then today the boundary would stop here, and then go straight across, or perhaps along this line here. And this part would have been claimed by both Pennsylvania and Delaware, whereas this part undisputedly would have been Delaware. And this here goes into what is called today the Delaware, well, what we could call today the Delaware Wedge, although today it would just be called Delaware. And then Pennsylvania would be on that side of the monument, kind of everything up that way would all be Pennsylvania. And as you go around, you're then in Delaware the further you go around. So if this line is the actual border, so Delaware all the way around here, Pennsylvania all the way around here until you get to Maryland, and then it becomes Maryland. Alright, so I hope I've explained the Delaware Wedge and the land dispute between Pennsylvania and Delaware. As a bonus, I'm going to head back. Then I'm going to show one other item that I think is kind of historically significant, not necessarily to this issue, but it shows an old marker between Pennsylvania and Maryland. It has really nothing to do with Delaware, but I always thought it was kind of interesting. I just found it sort of by accident a few years ago, and I'll head over there now. And it's about I believe it's a 1/2 mile from the northeast corner. Alright, so this is the other thing I wanted to show real quick. This is a 1/2 mile from the northeast line. So this side is Pennsylvania, this side is Maryland, and that side is actually a state park. Alright, I'm going to sign out from this little bridge here. I always kind of like this bridge. This was probably once upon a time used for heavier vehicles. This is probably a road at one point, and that's why it was built up so heavily there. But I just want to do a sign off from here, and I hope I've explained this issue of the Delaware Wedge properly. I hope you understood what I was trying to say as far as this disputed land between Pennsylvania and Delaware. I think it is complicated without the maps. So as always, I thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.